Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stuart, and I am the educational gardener here at Castlebank Horticultural Centre in Lanark. Today, I'm just going to be talking a little bit about growing native trees from seed. It's currently the start of November, and this is a pretty good time to be having a shot at doing this. So what I've got here on the right, just a few of the potted trees that we have here at the centre that have all been grown either by seed by us or by someone else, and then we've taken the saplings on. So here we've got a little Scots pine, we've got a small hazelnut tree. This is an English oak. I've got a little silver birch, and then a wild cherry. So all of these trees are found round about us. We've got mature ones. So for example, this wild cherry came off of that tree just over to my right. So that's probably about 100 years old wild cherry. And every year it produces thousands of cherries that the pigeons eat. And then they pass through the pigeons and they drop them, and a lot of them germinate. So we get hundreds of cherry saplings just germinating naturally, and we just dig them up. But you could also collect the cherries and take them away and sow them somewhere else. So what I've got here, I'm just going to show you quickly how to plant some of these larger seeds, larger nuts. So I've got the hazelnut. You all know what hazelnuts look like. I actually collected these in France a couple of months ago. And then here I've got some acorns off of some very ancient 500-600-year-old oak trees within Lanarkshire. So I'll show you the oaks first, and I've got this bit of paper so you can see the seeds really clearly. So these ones, here's the oak, the acorns, and you can actually see that many of them are already germinating. Okay, so coming out of the bottom there, you can see this. That's the root coming out. So that's the first bit of the seed to germinate. There's another small one with the long root coming out. This is because some seeds have a period of called dormancy. So when they're produced, they won't germinate straight away. But oaks, they don't have that dormancy. So immediately these acorns just start to germinate. So you've got to be quite quickly getting these either planted or sown in pots. So it's very, very easy. I'm just going to show you this quickly. This is just a little jug of water, and you can see that some of the acorns are sinking right to the bottom and others are floating on top. And you can do this to show you if the seeds are viable or not, if they're going to germinate. So all the big ones that have sunk to the bottom, many of these are the ones that are already germinating. And then there's some, I've got some in my tray here that are much lighter in colour. They're floating on top. So that means there's some air within the acorn, and that's why they're floating. So it means there's a much less chance that they will germinate successfully. But if you find loads of them, it's worth a go. Put them in the ground and see if any of them come up. Okay, so it's quite important when you're sowing acorns that you have a nice deep pot. So the root, it needs a good deep root run for the tap root to go down. If you put it in a very shallow tray, then you would get a really deformed, not a good strong root system. So you could sow these acorns on the ground, but I'm just going to use these pots. They're about 10 centimeters deep. And what I've got here, I've just got some leaf mold. So this is just leaves that we collect up in the park, and we leave them for a couple of years, and they all break down into this really nice stuff, which is great for planting these seeds or things like bulbs. Then I'm just going to choose the biggest ones first, or the ones that are germinating already. You've got to be quite careful if they're germinating that you don't break that off. If that breaks off, that's it, done. So I'm just going to make a small hole with my finger and pop it in with the root down, or if one that isn't germinating, it's the pointy side that goes down. And I'm probably just going to put 2 in a pot like this. If you're sowing them in the ground, you could put lots and lots all together and just see what happens. And then, so that's about 1 inch down. I'm just going to top it up. And that's pretty much it. So that's as easy as it is. What's important to do, however, is to protect these over the winter. If you plant hazelnuts or acorns and you get mice outside or in your shed or in your garage where you're keeping your seeds over winter, the mice will find them and they will eat them. So what I've got here is I've just got a little bit of mesh. You could use something like chicken wire, just something that a mouse can't get through, and I'll just cover that over like this, and I'll maybe tie it on the bottom and then just put them in a nice big tray and line them all up. And that just means that no matter how hard a mouse tries, he can't get in and actually eat the seeds. Okay, so just the same idea as the acorns with the hazelnuts. Just fill up our pot, give it a tap down, that gets some of the air out, and then we can put maybe 3 hazelnuts in there. These hazelnuts, so they're more dormant than the acorns, so they might take a little bit longer to germinate. It might take a bit longer for you to see signs of growth. So the acorns, you might see signs of growth very early in the new year, whereas the hazelnuts, that might be March or April next year before you see roots coming down through the bottom or leaves starting to appear above ground. And same idea, just cover them up with some kind of mesh to protect them over the winter. Okay, so just one final last thing to say about where do you put your pots. So all of these, they need to be cold in the winter. You can't bring them inside your house with your central heating on, it's just too warm. So you want to just sow your seeds and leave them outside, or you could have them in a greenhouse that's unheated, or even maybe in a shed if it's just somewhere to store them. You just need to make sure that the soil or the compost is moist so that the seed will germinate. And then you'll see the signs of growth early in the spring. And because they're going to have quite a big root system, they're going to need a lot of water, especially if they're in a pot. So having them in the ground or in big sacks or big pots maybe makes more sense than doing them like this. But doing them like this, it means you can protect the seeds very easily until they germinate and then move. Okay, so we're just going to go and find some other trees that have seeded themselves naturally. Things like silver birch and the cherry, because they produce so many seeds, and the silver birch seeds are tiny, they're carried on the wind. It means that they get scattered everywhere, so it's very difficult to collect them. Not easy to collect them like it is the acorns. So we can just go and find the small saplings and we can dig them up at this time of year. Once they've lost their leaves, you can move these trees round about, if they're small, not if they're not mature trees. Okay, so here we're in a kind of soft fruit area. We've got some gooseberries, raspberries, blackcurrants. But just straight in front of me here, this is a willow tree, crack willow, which has seeded itself off of a mature tree just 100 meters behind me. So the seed has traveled that whole way. It's going to lose its leaves very soon, but it's November, so this plant's going into dormancy now. So we can quite comfortably move it. It's still small, so all we need to do is nice sharp spade and get in, lifting it up like that. Try not to damage the roots. And I can see there's one main root here, and I'm just going to hold it by the bottom where it's much stronger than at the top and just see how it comes. So it's still another root, so I'm just going to go in from a different angle like that, and then it doesn't matter if a few break. So there we go. So that's I've left a little bit of root behind, but that doesn't matter. So that's a small willow tree, and now we can put that wherever we want. I'm going to put this in a pot and maybe pass it on to someone else. But that's just an example of a wind dispersed seed, so they make tiny seeds. I've just spotted this one. We're just out in Castlebank Park having a little walk, and down here is a very small oak tree. So this looks like a 1-year-old, probably germinated earlier this spring. So it should have a small root system. I'll just go in like that, see if I can get it out. Coming up fairly easily. There we go. Ah, that's great as well. So you can see here's the acorn. So that is the acorn that germinated this spring, and there's that long straight root. So that's why we want to have them in nice deep pots. Very important. Yeah, so that's a 1-year-old, so we can pot that on or move it somewhere else and let it grow up, and by this time next year it should be similar to the size that we looked at earlier. Right, I'm just going to put my little oak sapling just down there just now, because we've come down this path and spotted a couple of little trees here, and these are, well, there's 3 here in total. So these are silver birch, so these ones that have got the very small seeds. So I'll try and move this one first. Again, just clear some of the leaves away and go in. Don't go in too close to the stem. Come out a few inches. It's quite tough because it's stones here. I'm just going to push in, and it should lift up. And again, just pulling it from very close down. You can kind of feel if you're breaking roots. There we go, got the roots still attached. And yeah, so much easier if you live somewhere that's got birch trees round about. Instead of trying to collect the seeds and sow them in pots, just come out at this time of year and see if you can find any young saplings. Because this is a park, we don't want trees growing in the paths, so this is a perfect place to find these. And if they weren't removed and saved, they would probably just get trimmed down and cut down, and then that would be the end of them. So we're saving them and going to plant them somewhere where we want them to be. Right, so we're back at the Horticultural Centre. We've had a little walk and dug up a few saplings that we found around the edges of paths, places where we don't really want these trees to be. So definitely don't recommend that you go and dig up trees that are in deliberately planted borders, and try not to damage natural areas as well. But in places like the edges of parks or the edges of public walking paths, if we didn't save these, they would just get trimmed down. The council would come along and cut them all down and clear them out. So by digging them up, taking a little spade, you're actually going to be saving them. So just on a quick walk, we found some holly saplings. Found a little sycamore. I've got an elder tree. We've got quite a few silver birches, and then the willow, the cracked willow that we found earlier. So if you're going to be potting these up, because they are slightly bigger, slightly older. Again, I recommended a deeper pot for sowing your acorns, so you need an even deeper pot now for planting on these trees. And again, with the holly, you can see the nice deep straight root. So for that, for example, I've got some potting soil here, which is a mixture of loam or just good natural soil with some compost and some grit. I'm just going to fill it up, make a nice hole, and then just fill around about that with my potting mix. And just lightly firm it in with your fingers. And that's your potted on holly. Give that a nice water, and then it should fill up the pot with its roots next year. Keep it well watered, or you could plant it straight somewhere else in your garden, or just put it straight somewhere else in the ground right now and just miss out the pot stage altogether. Okay, so I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Hope you've found it useful and interesting. Please do try sowing some acorns, some hazelnuts. If you can find saplings, brilliant. You can even buy seed online if you can't find your own. Just try and find Scottish seed, Scottish acorns. You might see them on larger websites that are for decorative purposes. Those might not germinate. So you need to buy seeds that have not been heated in any way or treated in any way to kill off diseases, because if they are, they've been cooked and they won't germinate. So buy them from a source which is deliberately selling them to grow on. But best thing you can do is to find a local tree that you know produces seed and grow your trees from those, because they are adapted to your local area. So that is the ones you want to grow. And I deliberately went out of my way to collect these acorns from a very, very old oak tree. I know it's at least 500-600 years old. And because it's that old, it's lived through a lot of tough times, weather, climate. So going into the future, it's probably going to be resilient enough, and its offspring, these are its offspring, they will probably also be resilient and will be able to take whatever changing climate is to throw at them over the coming decades. One thing that I want to point out and talk about is different types of native trees. These are some examples. They all get to different sizes. You'll see a lot along lots of residential streets that were houses that were built maybe 80, 100 years ago. Very large trees were built on the streets, and you see that the paving's coming up, and then what ends up happening is they just get too big and dangerous and they have to be cut down, and that's a real shame. So it makes sense if you want to put one of these in your garden or in a small public space that you think about the type of tree that you're putting. An oak tree, for example, or a beech tree, don't know if you can see it over behind me. These are very, very large trees, far too big for residential areas or for a small garden. Great for big parks where there's huge amounts of space, or in woodlands. But if you've got a garden, you can grow something like a silver birch. This is a very slender, upright tree, so you're still going to get height. There's some behind me over here with the yellow leaves. So they've not got large branches that take up a huge area. They're quite straight, quite slender, and it's very, very easy that if it's too big, you can just take some of those trunks off or take some branches off. Another example is the hazel. This is quite a small native tree. It's great for wildlife, but again, you can just, if it gets too big, you just cut it down. It's called coppicing, and it just cut it to the ground and it will regrow. Holly, you can use that as a hedge plant, or you can let it grow into a shrub. What else? Things like hawthorn, blackthorn. So these are all small native trees. Things like your oaks, your beeches, your Scots pines, quite large trees, sycamores as well, quite big, horse chestnuts, quite big. So just think carefully about what you're going to put in your garden if that's where you're going to plant a tree.